Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm 4 here and it's time to go to Vietnam. Today we'll be covering Viamance Bruce for Dbt12. This is our first Dbt12 deck profile and my first video in quite a while because I've been sick, a lot of research papers, failed a bunch of tournaments. But today we are here to cover Viamance Bruce with Fate of Off. Say something.
You should have just bought a strike. You should have just bought a 5 new deck set.
I'm sorry. But yeah, Bruce actually is a really fun deck since set 9.
No, it's not.
It's very hard hitting. It's pretty good. But it was still vanilla. But in set 10, they gave us a freaking Pocket Dragonic Blade Master. And then in set 12, they gave us Geno, which is actually a really good card. It helps you play against evasion. It gives you a good Gandiva matchup. So all in all, I think the deck is shaping up pretty well. And it's pretty cheap because no one respects White Brothers. But today, we'll be covering Viamance Bruce.
Yes.
So we'll start with the right deck.
Oh, the right deck. You mean the right deck that hasn't changed since the start deck? Yes. You got Matt, the strongest intern. You have Steve. It gives you a Forerunner. Then you soul charge your over trigger.
Yes.
Yes. You have Richard. You put the starter into the soul to draw your over trigger. And then you have Viamance Bruce. He will never check the over trigger.
Yes.
So Viamance Bruce has 2 effects. His first effect is the reason why you don't play the old Bruce anymore. Is that at the start of your battle phase, if your entire field is xenophobic and all Diabolos, so basically it's all American footballer, you are in Final Rush.
Yes.
And if your opponent is grade 3 or greater, you go one step beyond. So you are both Final Rush and Final Burst, which is the new keyword that they added for set 9 for Bruce.
Yes.
Then his skill is that when he attacks, if you're in Final Burst, so once again, you still have to wait. If you go first, you have to wait. It's like same as normal Bruce, I still have to wait somehow.
Yeah.
CB1, choose an entire column and stand it. So basically, like, you still stand 2 units, but instead of standing 2 final units, you stand 2 units in the same column.
Yeah.
And they both gain 5k. So in total, the whole column gets 10. So that's the reason why we say that this deck hits for very hard numbers, because Bruce has always been the deck that is wait until turn 4 and then hit for very big numbers. Now is wait until turn 3 and then you hit for less amount of times, but you hit for the same, just as big numbers.
Sounds about right. But that's all the deck does in terms of Viamance Bruce himself until we really get into the support.
But Viamance Bruce does just having, because it says that you stay in Final Rush and Final Burst until the end of your, until the end of your opponent's next turn, which means that you are in Rush and Burst all the way until your opponent ends their next turn. So there are a lot of effects from the olden days of Final Rush that were really mid, because all they did was like, they are all like continuous effects, or they're auto abilities that only activate if you're in Final Rush, and because last time you were only on Final Rush during your turn, during your entire turn, they didn't really have much effect during your opponent's turn, but now they do because you are Final Rush during your opponent's turn now. So we'll go through some deck options when we get to them, but otherwise then the deck is still just as simple as always been. It's just swing a lot of times at your opponent's face, hope they die.
Yep, sounds about right.
Yes.
Moving on to our grade 3s, we obviously play 4 copies of Viamance Bruce, 1 copy of the Ike Ball, 2 copies of Greg, and 2 copies of Julian.
Yes, so Persona Right has always been very important in Bruce, but it's not important to the point where you have to play the card, because the card is because you still actually need the soul, and then not having Persona Right is not really the end of this deck as it was for normal Viamance, normal Violence Bruce, so it's fine to just play the 4 copies of Persona Right. Evergreen Tempest is mainly because it's still Dark States, we still build a lot of soul, and this deck very much needs the defensive options. So having Evergreen Tempest just as a free 25k shield, as well as a soft counter to the over trigger is not bad.
Not bad.
Okay, so for Julian, he's still the best. He's still the best board builder in this deck, because knowing that you're playing Bruce, they're still gonna rush you down, and they're still gonna give you at least 2 CB on turn 3, because they don't want to just like get melt. They don't want to like not deal any damage and then like get melted later on anyways. So what Julian does, if you forgot, is that when he attacks, if your Vanguard is Bruce, no, he does not need Final Rush, because that was the main reason why he was good, because he didn't need Final Rush, he just needed a Bruce Vanguard. Counter blast 1 for every 2 damage that you have. For every 2 damage without the CB, for every 2 damage that you have. For every damage that you have, against 2. But if you have intervals of 2 damage, so for every 2 damage that you have, you counter blast 1, you soul charge 2, you soul charge 1, and then you choose some card from your soul and call it. So usually at that point in the game, you're calling your right line, and more often than not, you're gonna be calling Steve, because this deck has a lot of front row attackers, but not as many back row boosters. Especially against Gandiva, you need to repopulate your back row and your front row, because VMS is gonna stand the whole column. Yeah.
Yep.
So having that extra grade 1 option always with Julian is really very strong. But otherwise he's still a very good attacker, and if you are at 5 damage and limit break 5, he is a solid beater as well. Otherwise it's just okay because he hits for very awkward numbers. Unless you are going first, because then 17 boosted by 8 is 25, so it's not bad. As for Greg, he's still here because this deck is very counterblast heavy, even though we have gotten rid of a lot of the CV in this deck. Greg, he says is that at the start of your battle phase, if you're in final burst,
Final burst.
yes, if you're in final burst, so it has to be when your opponent is grade 3 or greater. So plus 2 to CC1 and he gains 5 until the end of turn. So he's just there to ensure that if you at the very end of the game you get damage denied, or you're unable to you use up all your CV and you go all the way to 5 damage and then you can't do anything after that because Bruce needs to pay a CV every turn. You still have one out, but the way that the deck plays now, you really don't want to rely on Greg at all, and you should be ditching him as soon as you see him, unless you have like some foresight that you're gonna go to 5 and you need all the CV that you need, all the CV that you get. Yeah. But we've already taken out a lot of the CV in this deck as much as possible.
Okay. Moving on to our grade 2s, we play 1 copy of Richard for the right deck, 4 copies of Diabolos Rabbit Carrier Gino, and 4 copies of Diabolos Girl Megan.
Yes.
So we covered this already in the right deck, so we don't need to talk about it.
We'll just cover Megan first. This
It's
is
quite
the
faster.
easiest one. Megan is just every time he attacks, she gains 10.
That's it.
So because Viamance stands the whole column, she's gonna attack twice. So she's 30k on her own, 35 with Viamance restand. Yeah. And then boosted by a booster, she's gonna hit for very high numbers even when you're very first grade return. So this is the reason why that we are not playing Eden is mainly because the crit is very good but the number is otherwise very small, and he's very reliant on triggers to close game, whereas Megan, so long as you can push your opponent to 4 or 5, she's guaranteed going to deal at least 1 damage to your opponent at that point because they will run out of PGs eventually. Her column is more often than not going to need a perfect guard, to guard both when she attacks for the first time as well as she attacks for the second time. Whereas for Eden, his first attack is basically a whatever, then his second attack is the one you actually have to guard.
Yeah.
And the on hit retire really doesn't matter anymore because you have other options like Patrick and you have Leonard.
Yeah.
Which Leonard technically you can play in this deck, but it's really dependent on how you want to do your grade 1 and grade 2 ratios, because that's the bread and butter of this deck, because you need to build an entire column to restand. Speaking of
build a column to
grade
restand.
grade 2 building a column to restand, we have Gino. So Gino is the return of the way that Violence Bruce used to play, is that it just gives Bruce options to go into rather than like having actual like new win cons. So Gino's first skill is that and when your Vanguard attacks, if you're in final burst, you Soul Blast 2, and then for every 2 points of damage that you have, so it's the same condition as Julian sort of.
Yep.
Is that for every 2 cards in your damage zone, you may stand 1 unit, and if you stood 2 units, Gino gains 5.
Yep.
So basically, like if you have 4 damage, you stand Gino, and then the grade 1 behind him, and then he gains 5 himself. Because Viamance rule is gonna stand the other column, so basically you have 5 full attacks of both columns swinging together. And then Gino's second effect is that at the end of the battle, during your end phase, if you're in final rush, you put him in your soul, and you choose 1 normal unit from your soul and add it back to your hand. So you either choose him or you can choose like a perfect guard that you soul charge or something.
Yep. So he can perfectly evade now.
Yeah. So it's like you can just swing at him early against Gandiva, like on turn 3, and then you can bounce him back to hand, so that you don't have to worry about him getting sniped off and then you lose your multi attacker.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
Basically, you don't really want to use Gino's skill until the guy's at 4, because there's a horrible waste of Soul Blast 2. Soul Blast 2 is huge, by the way, because you're already gonna call Steve, and you're most likely gonna call a lot of stuff, and also whether it's like you play around with the build, like you use Jamil, you use Julian, things like that. So the fact that you have to pay Soul Blast 2 just to attack 1 time with a card that doesn't even gain power until you're at 4 damage is like, it's not a good look.
Yeah.
So use this card sparingly, but he is a very strong card, and he'll only get better as Viamance gets more soul charge in the future. For you to blind soul charge, then you can soul charge. Or more PGs, you can add them back to hand.
Yay.
Yeah.
Moving on to our grade 1s really quickly. We have 4 perfect guards, 2 copies of Heidi,
Yes.
4 copies of this is
Stephanie,
and then 4 copies of new guy, and then 1 copy of Steve.
Okay.
So really quickly, Steve's in the right deck. We've already covered him. He gains 5k if you're in final rush.
Yes.
So that's pretty cool with Julian. We play 4 perfect guards because we want to stay alive. 2 copies of Heidi. Heidi is just if you're in final rush.
No, it's every time it boosts. It gains every time that it boosts. If you're in final rush, it gains 5.
Which is really good because Bruce can withstand it.
Yeah, because boost can withstand it, so it's an 18k. It's always gonna be 18k booster. So in the events that your only option is to call Gino, or you can call Richard, using Julian, you can have Heidi behind that subpar grade 1 that's not Megan and boost with it, and the call also gonna hit for a huge amount because it's gonna be 20. Heidi's gonna be 23 when she re-stands.
Which is really good.
Yeah, but she only play a 2 because she doesn't have any other value other than being bitter, unlike Stephanie. So Stephanie is the main and she got advertised in the anime.
I mean, she became a promo.
Yeah, and she also got reprinted as a promo because of the sheer power that this one card can do. Because as we said before, you are in final rush until the end of your opponent's next turn. And Stephanie says, continuous. If you're in final rush, all units in the same column as her. No, all units in the same column as her gain 5.
Which means your Vanguard, Viamance Bruce, can literally become Majesty Lord Blaster, a defensive 18k demon that your opponent has to fight just because you have Stephanie in the same column.
Yes, but of course, Ganiva can just snipe her.
But like if you don't fight Ganiva, they have to hit into an 18k Vanguard, and it attacks for an 18k as well. So offensively, defensively, the card's really good in general. It's better than Mabel, I would say, because Mabel has the Count Blast 1, you get 1 drive only, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
But she just, for the sheer nature of existing, she turns your Vanguard to Majesty Lord Blaster. Literally, there's no point playing Majesty Lord Blaster anymore, just play Bruce.
And also it also helps protect your rear guards as well, because as you can see, we're not playing Leonard, we're not playing Eden. So Leonard and Eden are the only 2 cards that were in Viamance Bruce that used to be 15k continuous. Yeah. Well, now, and that's definitely will be 20, but then now, you still have some sort of defense against them.
From Dragonic Kaiser Vermilion.
Off skill day, ha 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 ha! I love Eva, guys.
I love Eva.
Then we have, what is
this? Is Derek.
Yeah, it's Derek with a RI and not Derek with a RY.
Yeah, so another Derek. Diabolos has 2 Dereks, guys.
Yeah. So his skill is that when he is that, if you're in final if you're in final.
Bro, you need to check this. This is
in final rush. Final rush. So you just have to be in final rush when he boosts. He gains the red text. So it's not the unit in front of him. He gains the red text. Yeah. That when he boosts, he gains 5k, and when your opponent would guard the unit that he boosted, they have to guard 2 or more.
Yeah.
So just the fact, and then at the end of the turn he retires himself because Ganiva will retire it anyway, so it doesn't matter. So the whole stick is that now the win con of this deck is to be annoying with the way that you distribute your power. You want to have this guy not behind Megan until the very end of the game. You want to have him behind all of your weaker rear guards so that
force them to guard
2 or more. Then your Megan, they have to PG anyways.
Gino.
Yeah. So with Gino, if you're at 2, you can just swing. Yeah, you can just if you're being cheeky about it, you can just swing Gino on his own. And then swing Gino again boosted by Derek. Then they'll be forced to guard with really, really weird amounts, 2 15ks or 2 10ks and two triggers. It's really, really bad.
It's a lot of shield that you're firing up from them.
When they're at the very end of the game, when your opponent is forced to PG, you put him behind Megan, and then now they're forced to drop 3 to PG.
Which is really insane.
Yes.
And our triggers real quick. Obviously, we need to play the Diabolos.
So this is a bit suboptimal. I'll just say first. This is mainly because I wasn't able to get the Bruce stun deck. Okay. So we are playing the wrong heal trigger. Yeah. You should by all accounts be playing the Diabolos heal. And if you had the over trigger, you should the red OT is honestly better for this deck.
But I mean, I think it's still fine.
Because we haven't done any deck profiles post. We haven't done that many deck profiles post festival. So now we finally have to have the discussion about what over triggers you should be playing optimally in a lot of decks now, because simply blanket statement saying that just play your Nation OT unless you're Captain Sanctuary doesn't really work all the time.
I mean, in Brand Gate it does.
Yeah, I mean sometimes Elder Breath is not the answer either.
Well, unless you are playing Japan, then you have to follow our rulings.
Yes.
Yes. I love the fact that Dimension Police is a dead clan. What about you? Certain somebody on the internet who's definitely watching this video. And yes, that is it for Viamance Bruce. Very simplistic deck. I don't think
he can change his colors, but the deck is the same.
Yeah,
he can go into his away clothes, but he's still almost the same. Vietnamese Bruce is a very, very simple and very, very straightforward beat down deck. Only one of the simplest decks in this entire format. Mainly because this format really doesn't have that many beatdown decks anymore. It's just all oh my god, retire, oh god, swing the entire front row, back roll retire.
Nah, it's
Then
okay.
and then like there like this basically is like a deck from the very first start deck with all the way back in March 2021 that has not really changed all that much. It's just that it's gotten 1 turn faster.
I mean, technically speaking, Bastion and Bruce both really never changed.
Yeah.
Virtually the same deck.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Speaking of Bastion.
Bastion, goodbye Gulliver!